All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Athletic Health Podcast. What an incredible episode that we have for you here today. My guest today is a New York Times best-selling author, the #1 book on stroke on Amazon. She was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. She was a premier guest on Oprah's Soul series, a presenter at TED Conference, which the YouTube video, which is in the YouTube link, that video is in the notes. It has amassed over 8.2 million views. She is the national spokesperson for the Harvard Brain Tissue Research Center. She's a Harvard-trained neuroanatomist. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you, Sean. Did you just hear my dogs go off, or are we okay?
Listen, we are in the money. If the dogs make it onto the show, the more the merrier. I'm more than happy to feature them on the podcast as well. So no worries at all. Dr. Jill, thank you so much for carving out some time to be with us and to speak about your mission. I got to say this, like right out of the gate, I'm a firm believer that everybody has like an intrinsic calling, a mission in your life, and like something that you were born to do. And unfortunately, I don't think everybody gets to experience that. I think we'll talk about left brain kind of gets in the way a lot. But watching your TED Talk, reading both of your books, I think you're doing it. I think you are put here on this earth to do this thing. So I cannot wait to share this with you. I'm going to do my best to stay out of the way here. I want as much as we can get from you during our time. So what I would like from you to kick us off is to give us the story, your stroke of insight. It is unbelievable. And if you don't mind, share the story with us.
Thank you. So I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who's only 18 months older than I am, who would be diagnosed with schizophrenia. So as a little girl, of course, he was my constant companion. And I realized as a little girl that he and I were not having the same experience in the way we perceived what was going on. And so because of him and his interpretation, say, for example, we're playing ball out in the front yard and the ball goes out to the street and mom comes out and she's yelling and screaming. Well, he thought she was angry. Well, I didn't think she was angry. I thought she was freaking out that we were going to get hurt. So those are really different perceptions of experiential reality. So I became fascinated with body language and facial language and the brain and what is normal, because one of us was different. That's all I knew, was that we were different from one another. And I didn't know if it was me. I didn't know if it was him. All I knew was we had this myth of personality. And so I grew up to study the brain, and it turned out that he would be diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I would be teaching and performing research at Harvard Medical School about how does our brain create our perception of reality. So I was teaching and performing research. I was a major advocate for the mentally ill through NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. There was a lot of meaning in my life. And then at the age of 37, I personally woke up one morning and experienced a major hemorrhage in the left half of my brain. And through the eyes of a neuroscientist, this was a fascinating experience, because I literally for 4 hours watched circuits inside of my brain turn off and go offline. And, this is what I taught. This is how I think. This is how I think about the brain as this magnificent collection of cells. Different cells work in different circuits to give us different skill sets. And so visually, I can literally, as I have this hemorrhage bleeding into my brain, wiping out circuits, I'm mapping the problems inside of my brain. I'm waffling in and out of the experience of the right hemisphere, right here, right now, present moment, blissful euphoria. And then I'm hooked back into the left hemisphere, normal reality, rational thinking, A, B, and C. What do I need to do to get help, to rescue myself? So I waffled in and out of those consciousnesses for those hours. And then I obviously did get help. And when I woke up later that afternoon, I could not walk, talk, read, write, recall any of my life. I became what I describe as an infant in a woman's body. And that was my story. And then it took 8 years for me to, after surgery, took 8 years for me to completely rebuild my brain circuit by circuit in order to be classified technically as a normal human being again.
Yeah. Uh, what I want to touch on in something in your story is, and this is what first got me to pick up this book. My stroke of insight was, you're gonna have to correct me on this, but it is, you lost like the boundaries, like the physical boundaries of your body. Like it felt that you were no longer. I think that's the quote was something to the effect of that you were no longer confined to the point where your skin meets air, and you became like one with the universe. Obviously, as a human being with left and right brain going, this is like very difficult to like understand. It must be equally difficult to verbalize what that is. But can you give us a little sense and elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the left hemisphere does a lot of things. The right hemisphere, it's temporally right here, right now, present moment, what is around me, in front of me. And as I perceive myself, my brain is actually organized to expand and become open to what is right here, right now. So all of my sensory systems are streaming in simultaneously, creating a magnificent collage of what this present moment is. Well, what that does then is I'm simply a ball of energy of this massive collection of cells in relationship to the atoms and molecules of energy all around me, and there's no separation. So I perceive myself to be at one with all that is. And the left hemisphere then takes that present moment experience of the right hemisphere and starts picking out details and details and more details about those details. And it also, there's a group of cells that defines me. I am Jill Bolte Taylor. That's my name. And in that language circuitry is the understanding of what I like, what I don't like. There's also a group of cells in the parietal region that then define the boundaries of where I begin and where I end, which is where my skin meets air. So the left hemisphere is the tool that our brain uses in order for me to become an individual with an individual identity, an individuation of a body in relationship to the external world. So the right hemisphere, it's right here, right now, big as the universe. I, the individual, don't exist. So I'm in the flow. I'm in the blissful euphoria of what is just current. And then the left hemisphere takes that apart, gives me an identity, gives me a name, gives me likes and dislikes, gives me a social norm that is defined by the external world of what is right, what is wrong. And then my left hemisphere takes me, the individual, places me inside the construct of the society in any way. Either, I'm on the good side, or I'm going to go buck the system, but these decisions get made. And these are all cells inside of our brain. So every ability we have because we have brain cells that perform that function. And so as I look at myself as an individual, all these different pieces of me in different ways of being and perceiving and experiencing and having output is based on the anatomy of our brain.
So I think the big thing that I want people to understand is, like, we're talking about obviously the two different hemispheres of the brain having two dramatically different functions. And what you were experiencing when that hemorrhage was occurring was exclusively how the right brain operates. Fair to say?
Fair to say.
Okay. So, all right. So then as you're going through it, you're experiencing this bliss. You're experiencing this euphoria. So I think on the TED Talk, you said that it was nirvana that you were experiencing. And so many people are like, this is the path to enlightenment and things like that. And one of the things I put down in my notes was that we are all just a moment, a snap of the fingers away from experiencing that, right? And it's all kind of interplaying. with what it is that we're doing. And in your book, Whole Brain Living, you wrote that it is clear that we as a collective are searching for a specific set of directions about how we can choose this peaceful mindset of our right hemisphere counterbalance the chaos in the world. Like I mentioned to you before we started recording, was I think this is one of life's big questions, right? Like, and so it's a tall task, and that's something that you made clear inside of the book. In my world, for athletes, for people that are in pain, like I mentioned, it's like the final frontier, right? It's easy for like us to say, you know, your back hurts because the hamstrings are weak. Your back hurts because you need more core strength. But when I start talking about how a fearful brain is preventing you from doing whatever it is or accessing that, that's something we see in sports all the time. And one of the other passages that stood out to me was you wrote, when our amygdala are triggered and we feel fear, we are not able to run the learning and memory circuitry of our hippocampi. Until we push the pause button and take a moment to calm down and feel safe again, we will not be able to think clearly. This is why anyone who is freaking out with test anxiety tends to perform poorly, regardless of how well they prepared. When our limbic system anxiety circuit is triggered, we are neuroanatomically cut off from accessing our higher cortical thinking centers, which is where our learned knowledge is stored. Yes. So when we talk about turning that off, and it's a huge question, right? But where do we begin on finding a way to turn the knob down on what I call neurological emergency brake? You're talking this neurocircuitry. How do we begin to do that?
I think that I don't think it's just how do we turn that down. I think the question is, what are our options? What are our choices? And if the part of my brain, which is really that left limbic tissue, the left emotional tissue where the amygdala and the hippocampi are, well, when that's stimulated, if that's stimulated and I'm running a fear response to the past or to the future, which is all based on my ego and my identity. So this is circuitry that really comes on in competition. Well, if you're doing the exact same thing and you're not in competition, do you play better? Do you do things better? Are you more free to just shoot those baskets and hit the mark? You know, do you just get in the flow? I mean, this whole conversation of the benefits of sports and getting into the flow. Well, what's the flow? Well, the flow is a different group of cells in your brain than the fear response. So if I'm being inhibited by my fear response, then I'm literally constricted. I have no possibility. The only possibility I have is to what is already ingrained. Well, when it comes to performance, you know, we have to have a curiosity and a flexibility to respond into the present moment to the demand, because every moment is the possibility of a new demand. And let's say we're playing basketball. I'm from Indiana. I'm okay with that conversation. So, okay, good. So let's say somebody, you know, somebody's going up to shoot a three, and they have their normal setup and everything's, you know, you've practiced the same move. It's on automatic now. So you go up, but somebody is rushing you, right? A defense. And let's say a person comes flying across in a way that normally it doesn't happen. So now I have to tweak my body and restabilize myself with flexibility in that moment. Rely on all the experience I've ever had to in this moment, create a new possibility. So this is what sports is all about. Sports isn't about, some sports are just do the same thing over and over and over and over, and you're all about the speed, right? But if you're not about that, if you're in an interactive sport that requires a creative movement and possibility, then you need to step out of the old fear circuitry that's constricting you, step out of the left rational brain that is all about A plus B equals C, which is really important when we practice, because you got to do it, routinize it into a habitual patterning. But then you need to step out of that, step into your joy, your curiosity, your possibility of the present moment, and then play ball, and then you'll play a completely different game.
So I'm hearing what you're saying, and you put that in there. I think you said one of the most common questions you get is, I have been practicing meditation for years and I've only experienced this feeling of euphoria. So I think, like we say, like step into the present moment, and I think I see where you're coming from on this. And we say step in the present moment. It's like I'm on the free throw line, which, by the way, in college, 46%, which is garbage. If I'm in a gym by myself, I'm gonna crush all 10 out of 10. But I get nervous with the circumstance of the game around me, and in that moment, it is, the overload of that left brain stimulus is overwhelming. It's gargantuan. I could say stay in the present moment all I want, but it's not happening. It's just so overwhelming. So are you saying, like, this has to be like something you're practicing? It no doubt does have to be something that you're practicing. But is that where the money lies?
Yeah. I think that you need to know what your choices are. What are my choices? It's one thing to say, don't be this. You're on the line. It's an important point. You got the pressure of the crowd. They're making all the noise. Your team versus the other team, they're stomping. Everybody's making all this racket. And oh my God, if I don't hit this, my whole future's over. People won't love me, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's intense. Okay. Well, that's one way of looking at it. But what if you've just, you're just there, you're at play. You're at play instead of at work. This is work. This is tense. Everything depends on this. But that's not where your talent is. Your talent is not in that constricted fear. So, but then it's like, okay, well, yeah, you can say play, you can say do this, you can say do that, but I can't get there because this is the reality of the moment. Well, if you practice knowing, differentiating your 4 characters, the 4 different parts of your brain, the 2 emotional groups of cells, what they do, what they're good at, what do they feel like, be able to in any moment identify which one you're currently in, and practice that, and then do the 2 thinking parts of your brain so that you know what it means. If I say to you, Sean, all of a sudden I'm going to have a character 3 moment, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to have a little fun. I'm going to pet my dog and then I'm going to giggle. And you can then decide, okay, well, do you go into your character 1 and just kind of like watch and analyze and think about it? Or do you like feel, oh my God, I can't believe Jill's doing this on my podcast. We have limited time. What's my audience going to think? Or do you say, oh yeah, what are your dog's names anyway? So we are making choices unconsciously all the time. So what if we actually know who inside of our brain, what are those characters, give them names, recognize their identity, really practice stepping into your character 3 or stepping into your character 1. And so when character 2, that little part of ourselves that is fretful or fearful, when we move there, do we want to stay there? Or do we want to step, okay, let's say, this is so common. Let's say husband comes home and the wife was excited about, we're having date night, right? It's date night. And so honey comes home and it's like, oh, and I'm ready. And it's like, I'm dressed up and I'm good to go. And he comes in the door and he says, oh gosh, honey, I'm so sorry. I need to work tonight, but I'll tell you what, if you give me an hour, then I can finish my stuff. Let me do my character 1, rational thinking, get it organized. And then we can go out. Okay. And we can do anything you want. The night's yours. You get to pick. And so I now, as the other in any relationship, there's 8 of us. That's what this really means. If there's 4 in each of us, there's 8 in a relationship. So then I make choices, and I can say, go into my little fretful, unhappy character 2 and say, well, damn it, you told me, and last week, and no, right? And I can just spew all this, and I'm just really unpleasant. Or I can step into my own character 1 and say, I've got an hour of things I can do too. And if I can support you in any way, let me know, and I'll meet you in, let's say, 75 minutes, dressed and ready to go. Or I can move into my playful side, and I can, character 3, and I can say, okay, you go do that, and I'm going to go play for a while with the dogs, and that'll be fun. and then come on down when you're ready. We are making choices all the time in how we interact with one another. And the same is true inside of our own heads. We are constantly making decisions. So the next time you notice that in this moment I can get mad at you, or I can really be supportive of you in a loving way, or pay attention. We are making these decisions, and what whole brain living does is it just helps us differentiate clearly who these four characters are inside of ourselves, so that we can bring them into a huddle, because they're the team, right? Bring them into a huddle, have a brain huddle, and let them be in conversation with one another, so that they're negotiating with one another in real time about how do I live a really happy, supportive life of myself. I am not your responsibility, but I am responsible for the energy I bring in to any space. So what are my choices? And the better I practice knowing each of these different parts of myself, identifying when I'm in each one, identifying when the people around me, which character profile are they in? Maybe my spouse and I, maybe we get along really well when we're both being rational thinkers, or maybe we're really good at when we play together, but maybe we're no good. As soon as one of us goes sour or unhappy, I don't know how to manage that. So I go unhappy too. And two people in that pain will never find a resolution. So in whole brain living, we can actually differentiate and get to know what our choices are. So if I'm on the line and I'm feeling the pressure and I'm thinking, oh my God, stress, 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 constrict, constrict, or I can step into my right hemisphere, I can feel the energy in the room. I can let it lift my shoulders, lift my air, lift my arms, lift my body, and I can make the best free throw shot you ever saw.
So one of the commonalities that I saw amongst NBA players, and it was interesting as I started in college and I worked my way up through the minor leagues of baseball and ultimately ended up in the NBA, was that the type of person that I was dealing with was increasingly, as I rose, they cared a lot less about anything. And it wasn't like an on and off switch, right? So like I always said that it wasn't realistic to expect somebody to be an assassin on the basketball court and be a financial, safe financial investor off of it. This is just how the circuits were wired. And the higher up I got, the more that demographic became prevalent. And it dominates the NBA. I mean, we're talking 99%. I mean, I got insane stories that you wouldn't believe about professional athletes not caring about even the biggest thing. And so with that, do you think that the people who are naturally, I look at those guys and they're just kind of naturally that way, are they more dominated by the right hemisphere?
Probably. They followed what they do well, right? Yeah. And if I'm in my body, the consciousness and the relationship of the vagus nerves and the gut and the brain is all about the right hemisphere. So the right hemisphere is kind of this universe of my brain in relationship to my body as one thing. So if I'm an athlete and I'm being athletic and I'm in movement and I'm perfecting my moves and my timing and I'm in the present and I'm, out until God knows after hours just doing what I love to do, right? Then I'm just in that right hemisphere consciousness, which is the right here, right now. And then the left hemisphere, it's much more about me, the individual. How do I define myself? Language skills, information and details to be able to have authority through the manipulation of details through sound, through language, where I become an expert and an authority. And now I'm using a whole different part of my brain, right? I'm using my left hemisphere. And the left hemisphere's value structure is based on a linear hierarchy. So the left goal of the left hemisphere is to get higher, 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 higher. And it always wants more. So it's motivated to get more. And it wants, so they're just two very different mindsets, but each of these mindsets has both the experiential of thinking tissue as well as the experience or emotional tissue. So we end up with these 4 modules of cells. Yes. And what happened back in the 70s and 80s with the split brain experiments was, some people then are more right brain and people are more left brain. And so the right brainers, they went more right brain, and the left brainers, they went more left brain, when we should have really done the exact opposite and done CrossFit with the brain and had the right brainers do more left brain skills so that they could become more whole brain. So now we have skewed ourselves to these 2 extremes, and it shows in so many ways, but it really shows in our politics.
So what I want the audience to, like, I want them, like, we're taking notes here. Like, what we're trying to say is, like, we want, like, the right brain is where we're trying to activate more. We're trying to access the right brain more to achieve those qualities. The professional athlete, the guy who's always been that, he's always been good. He's never really had to think about it. He's always just kind of had that confidence that he's potentially more right brain dominant than his left. Now, what we see in sports and what I see in my clinic, and so, like, the people that I work with are people that are in pain. They've been in pain for a long time. They've been all the specialists. They can't figure it out. Like, their body's different. And the hierarchy that I see is like, okay, like, initially, like, we can look at the muscular level. Then we can think like the training level. Like, are your muscles strong enough? Do they last long enough? The final frontier, like I mentioned, to me, is the central nervous system. And if the brain is not allowing you access to full movement, if it's always upregulating the sympathetic system, then you can't override that. As good as I am as a therapist, I cannot override a fearful brain. So the athlete, and my brother's a really good example of this. If he listens to this, I'm sorry for throwing you under the bus, but like, he was a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. He was elite, 1st round draft pick, and his first time pitching at Fenway Park, they threw him into a game, bases loaded. The Angels had already scored like 11 runs in the game. First batter was Mike Trout, arguably the greatest batter of all time, or hitter of all time. He hits Mike Trout in the shoulder. Next guy up, Albert Pujols, my brother has a poster of Albert Pujols on his wall as a kid. Albert hits a triple off the Green Monster. And, truthfully, like that, he was never the same pitcher again after that. And it got in his head. So now, are we saying that in this instance and similar instances, that you, like, awaken that ego left brain character 1, where it's like all of a sudden now there's something to protect? Am I right on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's consequences to my behavior. There's consequences, and that's very different from not worrying about any of that and just being in. Now, if your brother knew his brain better, and he had this experience, that's a crushing experience, and that's crushing on many levels. His performance, but also his emotional relationship with himself and his hero, right? I mean, this was a big one. And then the brain just, makes it even bigger and bigger and bigger. However, he did have the opportunity. He may not have been aware of it, but he did have the opportunity to go up to that fella, shake his hand, say, buddy, you're my superhero. I'm so sorry. Let's start over, and then back off, and then do it again. And instead of putting all the energy on that flaw or on that error and on that pain, pulling it back into the present moment and really begin again. So the more energy then he put into it, the more we complain about what we have to complain about, or the more we hurt about what we heard about. We're just refueling the circuits of that pain. So one of the secrets is identifying, if I want to pull the energy away from an old habit, and if my habit is to say, hook into that fear, whatever it is, even if it's my pain, And the interesting thing is there's research done that shows that the right hemisphere personalities, they have different relationships with their bodies than when we're in our left hemisphere. So we may have aches and pains when we're unhappy, or we're sad, or we're drained, or we're tired, or we're hungry. We might have, different pains than when we really are in the present moment and we've shown up to play. And it's like, so I'm sure you've had those times when you just really felt like, you're dragging and you're drained. And then all of a sudden a buddy comes over and says, hey, boom, and off you go. Right. And then you're in the present, and it's like, and you feel great. And so different parts of the body, of the brain, have different relationships with our body.
Yeah. So what I see, I think very few people are truly, I think the large percentage of the people are left brain, like their left brain is really running the show. And then, and look, in today's society, at least here in the United States, like it on some level has to, right? You have to be a productive member of society. You can't just be, off in Narnia, or what is it, Nirvana all the time, or La La Land, as you said it was. And so I think the right brain plays really well in athletics, but I think the majority of the people develop up, in school, and everything is pushing you towards that left brain development. When we start talking about like these incidents in our life, and my brother's was obviously a big one, it makes you feel a certain way. My brother shares an image all the time. He's getting a standing ovation on his way off the mound at Fenway Park, but it's a sarcastic standing ovation. They're happy that the manager finally took him out of the game. And I can't imagine 50,000 people standing when your work day is done because you did such a poor job. Like how that makes you feel. And certainly like anything that's highly emotionalized gets hardwired into the brain significantly faster. And what I think you did a really awesome job of reiterating in the book, Whole Brain Living, was that we are a feeling species, a feeling creature that has evolved to think more. And of course, certainly men have a hard time with that. And I was just reading, I don't know if are you familiar with Dr. John Sarno?
I'm not.
So he was a renowned back specialist here in New York. And his whole deal was that most back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain that he was seeing was simply a product of repressed emotions. And I've actually seen it work in the clinic, which is nuts. But so what I'd love for you to do here is try to connect this like kind of granola feeling of emotions and feelings with real neuroscience, because you did an awesome job of that in the book. And I think it's so important for you to connect that so people know that it's biology, and they don't have to become a Tibetan monk in order to, reach this state of being.
Right. So when I say we are feeling creatures who think, as you think about the evolution of the mammalian brain, and we are mammals, we are, and the primary difference between us as humans and other mammals is that we have this higher thinking cortex. But as information streams in through our sensory systems, it moves into the reptilian part of our brain, which is our brain stem. And then that sensory information goes directly to the cells of our limbic system, otherwise known as our emotional system. Experiential. It's emotional in the left hemisphere and experiential in the right hemisphere. So this is where we have an amygdala, one in each hemisphere, hippocampus in each hemisphere, in a cingulate gyrus in each hemisphere. So these are the primary groups of cells of the limbic system. And so what happens is the information streams in through these neurons, and then they go to the amygdala. First stop, pretty much amygdala. And the job of the amygdala is to look at the present moment and say, am I safe? Am I safe? And we feel safe when enough of the information streaming in through our sensory system feels familiar. So if we feel familiar, then the alarm, alert, automatic nervous system of the amygdala stays calm. And when it's calm, the groups of cells right next to it are the hippocampi. And then the hippocampus receives the information for learning and memory. And that learning and memory shoots up to the cortex, and then we have thinking. So when the alarm alert of our, fight or flight system is turned on, we're all about right here, save myself. We can't get access the information up here of thinking. So that's why if we're taking a test and we have test anxiety and we don't feel safe for whatever reason, doesn't matter the reason, if the amygdala are on alarm, alert, I cannot access even if I studied, right? So I'm going to have a poor performance because of my anxiety. So we are feeling creatures as that information comes in. It runs through this filter of, am I safe? If I'm safe, great. If I'm not safe, I need to pay attention. And if it's calm, then feeling creatures who think, then the thinking tissue can come online. Now, we are brought up in a society where if we train our men in particular, okay, so let's talk about the genders in the brain. Now, we all have a whole brain, right? But the reason why the male brain is so good at details and engineering is because it is designed for precision and detail, right? And they say, okay, let's go back hundreds of years when the men were out shooting the meat, right? You had to hang out, you had to wait, you had to be patient, you had to wait for the animal, or you had to go creep up on the animal and be really quiet. And then you had to take your arrow with a very precision, and then you had to hit that animal, and then you had to chop it up and bring it home for us all to eat. Okay, so the male of the tribe was good at detail because that was his job. Well, the female brain is more whole-brained, actually, which only means there's more fibers running between the two hemispheres because the female was at home, and she's at home, and she's got kids, and the kids are running all over the camp. And a woman had to know her spatial relationship with the world around her in order to know where are those children and are they safe. And then she also had to know some details about, okay, well, these berries that look like this, these are safe. And when the water looks like that, that's not safe to drink. So we end up with these two different ways of really from the bottom up organizing our brains, and the left brain development in the male. And then the language, how did language become more developed? It used to be only the priest would read. Well, priests were male, and only the priests had the mastery of the language and about the history and about, they ran the world. They were the masters. And then the women had different roles in the existence. And then over time, we started teaching everybody to read. And as soon as we start teaching everybody to read, the left brain, reading is a very complex process. You have to have a group of cells that knows sound. Dog is a sound. And then you have another group of cells that places meaning on that sound. So I can say dog, and we know D-O-G. Then we have the spelling of it. Then we have the writing of it. Then we have the reading of it. Then we have the speaking of it. And then we're bringing in all these details and organizing them in all these ways in these massive minds that we have. And then we're telling stories about it. So the left brain has this natural dominance now in most parts of the world, but not in all parts of the world. There are some cultures that are still very right-brained. And so those brains are organized a little bit differently in dominance. And then you have some brains that read pictorially, read up and down, and their shapes and images. And this one shape, for example, might mean the magnificence of the beauty you feel when the sun sets, right? One little picture. So those brains are actually going to organize information a little bit differently. So, but we as Western culture, yes, this left hemisphere, and then the left hemisphere has defined itself as what it wants to be, the boss. And as it's the boss, then it's got hierarchy. And as soon as it's got hierarchy, it's got competition to get to the next level. And we're never high enough. It always wants more. So there's never this true satisfaction and then relaxation. It's like, but there's this next goal. And that's the society that we've set up for ourselves on both a governmental and a educational level. This is how we are in our schools.
Yesterday, I'm walking home from New York. I'm coming home from New York. I'm walking through the Port Authority bus terminal, and there's this little bakery that's like right next to the escalator going up, and I know they got some good chocolate chip cookies in there, and I know I shouldn't be eating them. I know I'm a health guy, but I can taste them, right?
You can
And
smell them.
oh man, it's been a long day of work, right?
Yeah.
The mental toughness isn't where it was early in the morning. So I have this like internal like debate and like fight where I know I shouldn't do this. I know I'm going to regret it, but I can't. I'm like, oh, and I literally turn my body and I'm starting to walk in there. And as I'm doing that, I'm like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. And so like character one overcame.
Yeah.
But what I, we all can resonate with this. We can all resonate with knowing exactly what we're supposed to do. Yeah. But for whatever reason, this intense feeling, it just takes over. And that's what Dr. Jill's saying here is that like we are hardwired to go emotions first, to go feelings first. It's checking in with the amygdala to see where things are. And then we can go into our higher processing centers. So I think the next step for us to understand also hardwired are, would you mind giving us a brief overview of the 4 characters?
Yeah.
Because these are just as hardwired as we are to feel. Like this is not like a psychology experiment here. Like this is the cells of your brain. And I want to hammer that down so important, so much. Right. Because this is when we talk about healing the body, the physical body, this is part of the body. Yeah. And you have to understand that. So take it away on the 4 characters.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'm going to relate each of them to that experience with the cookies. Because they're all in there, right? They're all there. Okay. So if you look at this brain then, and it has 2 emotional groups of cells, and then we have these 2 thinking groups of cells. And the thinking groups of cells, new tissue gets added on top to bring new possibility, new filter, and a modulation of what the tissue's doing below. So we have this emotional stuff, and then we have this thinking tissue added to it. So I just organize it as character 1, 2, 3, and 4 just for convenience. And I start with the left hemisphere because we can relate to that. So the thinking tissue in our left hemisphere, I call that character 1. The emotional tissue in left hemisphere is character 2. The emotional tissue in the right hemisphere is character 3. And then the emotional tissue in the right hemisphere is character 4. So I just go 1, 2, 3, 4. So character 1 is the left thinking tissue. And this is what we consider our rational thinking brain. This is our language. It is me. I have an identity. I am Joe Bolte Taylor. These are my likes. These are my dislikes. I am a neuroanatomist. It's my identity as I relate myself to the external world. So this is my alpha personality. This is the rights and wrongs of society and how I fit myself into it. There's a group of cells that defines the boundaries of where I begin and where I end. So I know that. So it's my identity, my ego center. I call mine Helen. I encourage people to name that identity because I know Helen. Anybody knows Helen, like you said to me earlier, you're Helen. And it was like, yeah, we know what part of my brain we're talking about. Did you name your character 1?
So I did. I actually named him Dominic, because he tries to dominate everything.
Exactly. He's the boss. This is a part of my brain that I lost. And when it came back online, it said, thank you so much for bringing me back. Now I want to be the boss again. But the value structure is about me. I am the center of the universe, because that to the center of the universe is what's going on in the left hemisphere. So that's character 1. Character 2 is the emotions of our past and of our future. So now I have this identity and of me, the individual. I have a past, I have a future. Left hemisphere does that. I have the boundaries of where I begin and where I end. Me, I know me. This is the pain from my past. So when you were smelling that cookie, when you were wanting that cookie, when you were remembering that cookie, when you were being possessed in the craving of the cookie, the pull was to this part of your brain. This is the craving tissue inside of us. It has learned to want more of a good thing or want more of a bad thing. But what the point is, it wants more. It wants more of what is familiar. So now, if you couldn't you've never pictured one of these cookies, you're in your right hemisphere, so they're going to go do their thing. So if you couldn't remember how beautiful these cookies were, right? This is from your past. If you the smell didn't stimulate this remembrance and this desire, then you wouldn't have wanted that cookie. You would have just walked on by. So you're hooking into another time and place other than just the present moment. You got this craving tissue saying more, more, more. I want more. Oh, I want that. Oh, I want that sugar. I want that sugar. While you're left thinking, character one is going, I'm a health dude. I don't want those sugar molecules. I'm going to feel terrible after I eat it. And then character two's going, yeah, but it's going to be so good going in. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Oh, my taste buds want that. And the character one is going, walk on by, walk on by. Okay, so that's those two characters. The two characters then in the right hemisphere are the right here, right now, present moment. So right here, right now, in the emotional experiential tissue, what does it feel like in my body when I dive into the water? What does it feel like with the pressure of the water against my body? What does wet feel like? I feel wet. The temperature all over my body, the experience of what I'm doing. So maybe it's the experience of my favorite sport. What does it feel like when I'm in the zone and I'm in the flow? What does that mean to my soul? And I'm in that action and oh, it feels so good. And as soon as that ball leaves your fingertips, you know it was a hit or a miss. I mean, we know these things because they're in that character three, experiential, and it's curious and it's possibility based and it's just whatever is, and I'm good with whatever is because I am flexible in the present moment. I'm rigid and caught in pattern in the left hemisphere, but right here, right now, I can take all those different things that I've done, put them all together and now have a new experience. So that's the character three. So character three is coming down that escalator and it's smelling that cookie in real life. And it's going, oh, that cookie, that's good. And what does that cookie taste like? Because hopefully last time you had one, you actually ate it slowly and enjoyed it, you know. And
no chance.
You just devoured it like an animal, right? So your little character two got its hands on that cookie and it just devoured it. And then you feel horrible. And it's like, no, if you have had and you know, if you eat with your character three, then you get the textures and you get, chocolate chip is melted to perfection and the heat of the cookie and just all of it. And it's just like, oh, it's lovely. Well, then you can actually go back to that experience in the present and recall all of that because everything all at the same time and then just keep on walking because you already had the cookie. Right? The cookie's really a mind experience if you allow yourself to eat consciously. This is why it's so important to eat with consciousness and to taste and to feel it and to have that relationship because then you don't have to go put the sugar in your body. You can go back to your memory. Okay. So character three is about the experience, having the experience of eating the cookie. And it also gives you an alternative. Okay, well, maybe you have a yo-yo. Okay, you're a sport dude. Even a yo-yo is a sport, right? So you might have a yo-yo, or you might, you know, do something with your body. You know, you might walk a line. You might get on the escalator and zoom back around and see how many steps you can get in between now and your flight. But get back in your body. Get out of that little part of your brain that says, "Oh, I want that cookie. I want that cookie." And get back into your body because the body doesn't want the cookie, right? This tiny little part of your brain wants that cookie. So get back into your body. Reward your body by being healthy, by remembering the feeling of being healthy. And then if you're a prayerful kind of guy, character four is all about just the experience of the present moment without emotion and without action. It's simply this awareness that is like observing, you know, oh my God, I'm alive. I'm alive. I am this magnificent collection of 50 trillion molecular geniuses who are coordinated and working together to manifest in synchrony my health, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, just my health and who I am and the energy that I stream through me into the world. So I can take responsibility for the energy I bring to any situation. And it is compassionate towards others as well as towards myself. And it is open and supportive and nurturing and loving and kind, but in awe, oh my God, I'm alive. And knowing these 4 parts, practicing. So let's go back to the cookie. If I'm in the cookie, I could shift into my character 4, right thinking part of my brain, and I can just think, isn't it amazing that my body can crave something that's not good for it? And I'm so aware of the consciousness of the body and the cells and everything that is, and I can actually visualize the sharp edges of those sugar molecules as they pass through my blood vessels, piercing those capillaries open so that the immune system has to come in and bring, eosinophils and phagocytes and to flood it with my lymphatics and my immune system, because now it's cut me up. And it's, just this love of what I am. And no, I'm not tempted to do that to me. And we have access to that in every moment. So practice is the key, getting really good at all 4 of these so that when I have an experience and I have a conflict, I know what it means to say I have the power to choose moment by moment who and how I want to be. There are 4 of me in here. And then when they're all strong, it's just like on any team. You're going to, under certain circumstances, you're going to give the ball to the right person to do the right thing because they're good at that.
That's an awesome analogy. And as I was going through all the 4 characters in the book, I think anybody who knows me would say like character 1 all the way. But like truthfully, as I went through it, I actually found myself being more driven by character 2. Like I thought that he was making more of the decisions than like I think my character was like trying to override it all the time. And like as I've evolved, as I've grown, as I've become more spiritual, I feel that right tissue is becoming more prevalent, more something that I'm paying attention to just as I get older and mature and whatever else life experiences push me down that path. Okay, so as we get towards the end here, what I hope everybody is starting to see here, number 1 is that we have dramatic differences between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. I'm going to bet, listen, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to be left brain prevalent. It's going to be really prominent. You're going to really resonate a lot with that. One of the things that Dr. Jill mentioned in her book, which was remarkable, was how they brought, I believe it was Tibetan monks and Franciscan nuns into a SPECT machine. They were anticipating to see that when they felt in touch with God at the height of their meditation, that a new part of the brain would activate. What they actually found was that the left cell, the tissue of the brain was quieting down while the right side was becoming more prevalent. So what we're attempting to do, what we're trying to move towards, is how do we simulate that in our own respective worlds? We're understanding now that human beings are feeling creatures who also think. So making changes is far easier if you're going from the emotional level. What Dr. Jill just pointed out is the 4 characters of everybody's brain. 2 and 3 are the emotional and feeling characters, where one is a thinking character. 4 is it fair to classify that as a thinking character? Is it?
I think it is, because in thinking, I measure it as the absence of experience or emotion. So thinking thinks, emotion emotes. And thinking, even though it's not thinking in relation to the external world, it is completely aware of its internal systems.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so the final thing, and I'm so glad that you put this in the book. I didn't expect it. And this is something that I've been playing with and working on for so long. And it's really, so the people who are listening, the podcast is going to end and we're going to go off into our worlds and we're going to try to apply some of this stuff. And I want to read one passage from Whole Brain Living here that to me is the most profound thing that you put in the book. You wrote, "It is said that in the moment when the hero lays down the sword of his left brain righteousness and ego, he is emancipated from his left brain individuality, dissolving back into the cosmic consciousness of the universe from which he originated." You continued, "Once the hero has battled his fear of death and all the other left brain monsters he had been clinging to throughout his everyday life, he is now free to gain the insights of his heroic quest while enveloped in the wisdom of his euphoric right brain." For me, this hit very much home. I think that my character one is always trying to silence his character two. When I read John Sarno's book about repressed emotions, I started exploring emotions that I might be repressing, and I found some, and that was interesting to me. And one of the common quotes that I tell my clients all the time, and the people who are going down this path, is, "This is the hardest thing. This is your life's quest. This is the hardest thing that you will ever have to do in your life." I believe that. You're going against your literal circuitry of your brain. And our first step is to understand the circuitry and know that you're being governed by these cells. But what I would love for you to close us off with here is your thoughts on this hero's journey, the difficulty of this path, the reality of this path, and how somebody who's going into their world armed with this new information, how do they go? What's your advice on the hero's journey, their own pursuit of this?
The whole reason I added the hero's journey is because this is what we are. This is life, right? This is life. We have our monsters. Our monsters keep us in the need to protect ourselves. That's the left hemisphere emotion of all my fears. I think, and then in the ego, me, the individual, and it feels like death if I let go of my fears. Well, we're not asking you to give them up. We're asking you to set them aside for 5 seconds and then go back to them. They're right there. They're not going anywhere. And then give them up for maybe 30 seconds. Practice just being okay with life and yourself. Oh my gosh, what would it feel like to be a peaceful person? And then imagine that and try to be that. And then it's like, okay, then go back. They're right there. So we're not asking you to give up yourself. We're asking you to set yourself aside for just a little while. And so as we combat all of these fears, and death is a big one, because if my entity is a group of cells in an ego center in my brain that's about the size of a peanut, and those cells are me, and you're asking me to turn me off, then that's death, right? That's fair. Why would I do that, right? That's horrible. But if I realize it's just a group of cells about the size of a peanut in my left hemisphere, and I routinely, probably, there are times in my life where I am happy. There are probably certain people who I do enjoy, or I get lost in a TV show and it's not about me and I'm just kind of in the present. So recognizing when I'm already there, I think, is also a key. And then, but it's not enough to just be on the journey, drop release my fears, release me, the individual, go on the journey and find myself to be in the present moment. This is where my wisdom is. This is where I'm connected to all that is. I've set myself aside. But the real key then is, well, what do I do then? I can stay in my euphoria. I can stay out on the mountain underneath the Buddha tree. I can stay off in meditation. I can go off into a monastery and be a monk or be a nun for the rest of my life and really just be there. Or do I take the wisdom of what I have gained and bring it back to my ego life and then live by the values that I have gained, which is, it's not just about me, my ego, it's about us as living beings in relationship with one another who are having relationships across time where we are growing and we are learning and we are sharing, and then we're gone, we're done. And so, the story of the Buddha is he didn't have to come back. He chose to come back. These different stories. When I had my stroke, I didn't have to come back. I chose to come back. And I agreed with myself that I would become as normal as I possibly could to appear normal to my fellow man, to bring back an awareness of what was happening, what the experience was like right here in the right hemisphere of my own brain. And I thought, if people knew that they could step out of the pain of their past, step out of their ego self into the actual present moment, allow themselves to open and feel the expansive euphoria of the present moment where I'm just in the flow of what is and I'm open and loving. If people knew they could step into that in an instant, wouldn't they choose to do that more often? And wouldn't we create a different world? And that was my motivation to recover.
There's not a person, I'm confident, that is listening to this right now who has not tried that, who's not tried the meditation stuff, has not tried to step out of that left brain and quiet the brain. And I think that, like I said early on, this is no doubt your gift. This is no doubt your mission. For everyone listening, I couldn't truly recommend these books anymore. My Stroke of Insight, Whole Brain Living, these were super profound books. And if you're at all interested in this, and the beauty of neuroscience is easy to understand in here too, which is talk about a tough nut to crack, is making neuroscience understandable. So Amazon, #1 on strokes on Amazon. Grab your copy for sure. Dr. Jill, where can people find you? What's your recommendation for people to move forward? I certainly recommend the TED Talk as well. Any additional?
I think you did a pretty good job. And, I'm very user-friendly. I'm Dr. Jill at drjilltaylor.com. And, I care about working with people who work with groups of people to help their groups of people better understand these 4 characters and how to find more peace. And the real key, in my opinion, it's the roadmap. People say, well, get out of your pain. It's like, well, I don't know what my choices are, right? Well, this helps you understand who else is inside of your head, who you can pull the energy, because ultimately we boil down to this energy and cells. And I can put my energy and my pain in an instant, or I can have a whole body laugh in an instant. And that's about where the energy in the brain goes. So thank you so much, Sean, for the work you're doing. And this so applies to your world. So thank you for inviting me in to speak with you and your audience.
Outstanding. Thanks so much, folks. And we'll see you in the next episode.